because Tyler is finally back and we get to the conclusion of the flash forward from the beginning of the pilot. I made again a double episode with 2 episodes from Revenge. So here we go again. About the title and Emily's monologue. I love the title because that is precisely what Tyler is causing in this episode. He is pure chaos and even likes it because for control freak Emily, chaos is her worst nightmare. They could have titled it Catastrophe too, but chaos is even better because that is the one thing Emily tries to avoid through her whole mission. But since Fauxmanda and Tyler came into the picture, fails to prevent. I like in this shot that we do not know if and where Tyler's revenge fantasies are mixed with the content of Emily's infinity box. They really resemble each other, though Emily is more controlled than him. But she has the same way of fixing on her revenge. About Emily and Daniel. In this scene it screams again that Emily tells him the truth. I know some will disagree, but after all the lies and secrets his parents kept from Daniel, there was still a slim chance in Season 1 that he would switch over to Team Emily before becoming a full-grown Grayson. About Fauxmanda and Tyler. It was a nice twist that he is turning Fauxmanda against Emily. I mean, even I am on Fauxmanda's side in this love triangle. About Charlotte's downward spiral. This trope seemed to be inevitable from the start. But I just do not like where Charlotte's storyline goes from here. Declan's idea with the therapist is really great. I do not know why her parents did not think about it earlier and why Emily seems not to care at all. I know she is busy with Tyler and Daniel in the next couple of episodes. But she witnesses Charlotte's problems firsthand and does little to help her, even though she knows she is her sister. About Edward Grayson's role in this episode. I do not like that he is the one who prevents Charlotte from going to a therapist. I mean, why should this be such a great deal? Charlotte could have just omitted the name of the man her mother slept with. After all, it does not seem to bother her yet who her biological father is. So she could have talked with the therapist about her problems and still avoid a scandal. And after all, does a therapist not have a vow of silence? Any good therapist must care about how a scandal would affect Charlotte as their patient. Therefore, I do not think that any serious therapist would do his or her patient harm in that public way. I must admit that I would like to see Emily kick Edward Grayson's ass for what he did to Charlotte. Ultimately, he was the one responsible for her fast demise in the next episodes. And he was even willing to blackmail her with Declan and take him down as well. What kind of grandpa does such a thing? I am sure if Emily was not that busy with Tyler, and if Grandpa Grayson had come back, she would have taken him down in her own way. Too bad that we did not get to see that. And as I said before, it would be interesting for her revenge ender as well. 'Cause he would have known something about the David Clarke conspiracy. How he meddles in everything in this episode, it is highly probable that he knows more than we think. About the Haiti plot. And again there is this huge plot hole. I do not know why they are bringing this up again. Maybe Nick Wexler tried to land another role and they needed an excuse to not show him for several episodes. But this Haiti plot really annoys me every time. If they really wanted to let him sail away, why did they not do it in this episode? I am still thinking that Nolan was behind it. Would be fitting to his character because he wants to get Jack out of the blast. Or Emily could have done that with the help of Takeda to separate him from Fauxmanda permanently. But if so, why did she came up with this plan earlier? Anyway, I do not like this out of the blue call. It reeks as if someone else was involved. I love the code in everything Emily and Nolan say in this little scene, and I love Nolan's idea that Emily should go with Jack. Definitely suspicious, but he should have known that Emily would never give up her revenge even for Jack. About Daniel's idea running away with Emily to Paris. This was maybe the dumbest idea Daniel ever had. I know it should look like a romantic gesture, but it is just so stupid. He does know Emily not a little bit. Why should she go with him to Paris? Her revenge plans aside, for which she has to stay near his parents as possible. She never showed a special connection to France or Paris. If he wanted to go somewhere to escape the Grayson family legacy, why not go to Japan? He knows Emily speaks Japanese, and I am sure he does speak as bad French as Japanese, so why does it has to be France? And the United States are big. Why not try to build a future somewhere in the States or in England? This would have not felt that awkward. And Daniel could still have his restart. I mean, Grayson may be big in New York, but the business cannot be so great that it controls all states. Besides, Daniel could have found another profession than being an investment banker. It seems to me that this scene with Takeda was just to explain later why he is pushing Emily's revenge agenda forward. He fears Emily will go with Daniel and forget about her revenge cause she is in love with him. But if Takeda really thinks of Emily in that way, then he really does not know his student. About Tyler and Fauxmanda again. That is what I enjoyed the most on Revenge. How they tied several characters and plots together. Emily used Tyler's outburst and his criminal past to pin the murder of Frank on him so she could save Fauxmanda from this allegations. That is the reason why Tyler wants to destroy her, and going after Daniel is just his revenge for Daniel not loving him back. So in his twisted mind everything fits into place like Emily's revenge and her plans. About Victoria's and Conrad's divorce. I always knew that Victoria had a secret agenda in this. After all, she thinks she lost the love of her life because of Conrad. Though she tends to forget that it was her own idea and Conrad had already thrown the towel since she came along with her plan of framing David. As I mentioned it before, I like that Conrad, and men in particular in this show, are shown far less manipulative and thoughtful than women. It is Emily and Victoria who they should be afraid of, because both women can take down the men in this world with their wit and resourcefulness. Again, I love the editing here. First Victoria with the decision to blow Grayson global and the integrity of Conrad, and then Emily putting a gun under her dress. Both women are more than capable to defend themselves and are far more ruthless than their male counterparts. A theme I enjoyed through the whole show. And again, Daniel is blinded by outward appearances. Emily is far beyond Cinderella, who is waiting for a prince to rescue her. And his surprise with Paris is on so many levels a bad idea that I do not know where to start. Emily's reaction to this romantic but very ill-considered idea was more than predictable. About Fauxmanda's dress. Too bad we did not see Margarita Levieva in that stunning dress. Would have been the first time she wore red after her famous red bikini. I think in the whole show she did not wear red once again, only purple. I do not know if it was on purpose because red was reserved for Emily, or if they just thought it not fitting for her. Anyway, I would like to see her in the dress and even more helping Emily. But maybe that had only get her killed. So it was better that she kicked his ass in this scene and ran away. About Daniel and Victoria talking about Emily. I think this was the most honest conversation between the two about Emily till season 3 and 4. Like I said it before, Emily and Victoria know each other so well and can estimate each other's decisions because they have a similar personality. Though Victoria is wrong that Emily does all this for status, she has one point right. Emily is ambitious, will stop at anything to get through with her agenda. A character trait she shares with Victoria, who is and is in the same kind, driven and relentless. For both women, Daniel is just a pawn through Victoria would never admit it. Daniel's fate is in the same amount Emily's and Victoria's fault. And Daniel is clearly till season 3 in love with an illusion Emily created for him. But you must admit that Emily in the end always cared for him. Maybe she was not in love with him anymore after season 1, but she never stopped caring for him and his future. So maybe they could have been a chance of being friends here if they had chosen another path for Daniel in the next season. About the editing again, I like that they solve every question I got when watching the pilot. For example, I always wondered about what Emily and Daniel fought and why she had sand on her hand when we first saw Emily. No, we know cause she was burying the infinity box and the fight was about the same old, their different perspectives, how and where to build a future together. But in a way he is right, Daniel is standing at the crossroads, and for their relationship it would have been better if they had gone to Paris. Like Jack and Fauxmanda, who could have been happy anywhere else with no one of the Graysons near. But as happy ever after does not exist in the Revenge universe, there have to be new problems to face, as we see later. One last thing about their fight. I like how they are mirroring the flashback with Victoria and David on the beach where they showed the close-up on their hands divided. They do the same here with Daniel and Emily. And his question is the same as in season 3.
Why do you want to marry me, Emily?
But in season 1, Emily can look him straight in the eye and says I love you because she still means
then come
it.
Away with me.
In season 3 she lies and cannot look him in the eye. About Fauxmanda's loyalty to Emily over Jack. Even though Emily has not been fair to Fauxmanda, she cannot be but loyal to her. Cause she knows Emily is in danger, she runs away from Jack to warn her. It is not fair, but I guess more realistic, that Fauxmanda gets no big reward for this but ends up dead in the end. I really would have granted her and Jack the happily ever after, though Fauxmanda's death drove Emily in season 2 on the right track again. But after this episode and the ones before, I really cared for her and wanted her to have a happy end with Jack. Especially after Emily got back together with Aiden in season 2, I was rooting for these two couples. About the flash forward, I like that they always show what we have seen in the first episode, completed by new scenes that answer not only the big questions we had in the first place, but fill in the little blankets too. So with Emily and Takeda, Jack and Fauxmanda and all gets tied up in a really nice tableau. About Tyler telling Daniel some kind of truth. They lost a good opportunity here, too. Daniel could have known the whole truth from Tyler and confronted Emily with his point of view. They could have showed an emotional scene in which she tells him the truth, and then he could have decided if he would keep her secret or go straight to his parents. It is odd that he never asked about all this twice and that the Graysons never connected the links between Emily and Fauxmanda. About Takeda's role in all this. I know he wants to fix Emily's problems in his own twisted ways and wants to set a higher speed on her revenge agenda. But I do not like that he meddles into every relationship Emily has. He pins the blame for Tyler's murder on Daniel and uses Jack's feelings for Amanda to do the same with him. And then he takes Fauxmanda away as something as a bargain for Emily's loyalty. For cinematic reasons, I really loved how they solved this. Victoria in her blood-red dress turning Tyler, so we finally get to know he was the one who got shot and not Daniel. And Daniel coming from another direction with his jacket full of blood stains. That was really great and surely one of my favorite scenes from the whole show. Though the finales are great, too. These flash-forward episodes always feel like a mini-finale and surely as good as a real season's finale. What I so great on Revenge that even though they answered the question who died, they still left us unsure if either Daniel, Fauxmanda or someone else shot Tyler. Fauxmanda already killed someone and Daniel seems absolutely capable of killing someone self-defense or even in anger. I like that they slowly turning him evil because since the pilot he was clearly too naive and boyish. About the title scandal, I am still happy that they dived into the scandalous trial plot. They could have made a time jump here and shown that everything is alright or not if Daniel would have been convicted. But they really made the next couple of episodes about how the Graysons try to get their son out of jail and deal with this new scandal. Too bad we did not get to see how Edward Grayson would have handled this. He surely would have not approved how everything went down. I still love how they try to connect this with the scandal of the David Clarke trial. Daniel's trial brings back some memories and we see more flashbacks with Victoria and Conrad that fill some blanks. And again the dynamic between Conrad and Victoria is shifting as we see his confession to Victoria. So we get to know it was her idea, not Conrad's, to frame David. Which tells us that she is not an innocent victim at all. Though I must admit how he paints their future in dark black, which seems very threatening to me. It also seems as if he was prepared to tell her the solution for their problem right away.
They're gonna freeze all of our assets and you're gonna have to raise Daniel alone under a cloud of disgrace.
About Daniel's role in this episode. I like that they cast doubt on his innocence. After all, he shot Tyler not in the back but right into his face. So Daniel is not that innocent anymore as he was before. Though it is good that they made Takeda kill Tyler. This gives the audience a hint that Daniel can be saved and is not doomed like his parents. I also liked how they make him doubt and question Emily for the first time. Too bad they did not have the guts to drive it to the point where she cannot disperse them anymore and has to tell him even some kind of truth. I also loved how the two women outline each other in Daniel's presence. Something I never get tired of. Even I do not like Emily's and Daniel's relationship in the later seasons. By the way, I like that Nolan is wearing a red jacket though all other men wear white suits. Shows that he is in Emily's revenge and the team and gives his outfit more edge. About the scene in the car. Though I do not like dark scenes in which you can barely see some face expressions, I like how they take advantage of the night and the lights in the driving mirror. About Daniel trying to find Emily's secret. Because of Takeda he could not find the infinity box, but when did Emily have the time to put these fake items at the place where Tyler found her infinity box? Was it when she went back to fetch clothes for Daniel and of course keep her infinity box safely hidden? That was more forward thinking than I would expect after this shocking event. And why is Daniel so easily to content? Yeah, Tyler was obviously crazy, but the names on the photo must have been familiar to Daniel. At least Frank Stevens, who was an employee of his parents. And even though he was not there at Emily's first takedowns, he must have heard something about the scandals around it since his parents always were involved. So why does he not care? I would have bring that up in the morning when I gave some thoughts in the night, cause I am sure Daniel cannot sleep after what had happened. For he must at least assume that he could be the one who shot Tyler since he can remember that he shot to him once in that night. But maybe men work different than women. About Emily and Jack in the next couple of episodes. It is really sad that the writers are driving Jack and Emily towards each other only to tear them apart again. It is one of the tropes I hate in TV shows. Most love triangles or love stories with other obstacle work that way. You see them coming together and being happy for a second just to see them breaking up in the next episode. It is frustrating, and even though the writers keep saying that is how we want it to be, I do not think so. I know it is kind of boring when everyone is happy, but if you really root for a couple you want them to be happy together. Maybe that is why I loved Emily and Aiden so much in season 2. Because besides their fights they always found their way back to each other and had been good and happy together. He was her safe haven amidst all the trouble around her revenge ender. About Charlotte's and Declan's storyline. This was the saddest part of their storyline besides the end in season 2, of course. I thought Charlotte could become a better person through her time with Declan. But she always falls back in the same behavior pattern. Her character is really tragic, even more than Emily's obsession with her revenge. The drug addiction and her reckless behavior in season 4 is something that could literally kill her. And in the process she lost all the people she cared about. Everyone who tries to help her she drives away, so her behavior is even more self-destructive than Emily's. 'Cause if she has to, Emily always comes around and listens to the ones who want to prevent her from harm. Charlotte, however, lost herself in this downward spiral more than once. Maybe her character should be something as a warning to young viewers, but I just do not like it. About Daniel's arrest, I like that they did not try to mirror it with David Clarke's arrest or put a new flashback in. I loved how Victoria totally freaks out and tries to free him, what is useless of course, while Emily just froze. It was nice to see that Emily stands by his side and tries to reassure him that she will help him. The next couple of episodes had my favorite scenes between the two in it, which I often use in my YouTube videos. Though if you think about Emily's plan, it does not make much sense that she is helping him. Takeda would think the same, she should be thanking him instead of working against him. Because as odd as it seems, this is not part of Emily's revenge agenda. It is Takeda's work, and if they really had planned his end so far forward, what I do not believe, it would have been the perfect first breach of trust. Because Emily is totally in the blue and does not want all the things Takeda sets in motion. I must admit, if I think about Emily from the pilot, this is a totally different Emily. Instead of using all this and the trial to get payback for what Victoria stole from her, she tries to save Daniel. Spoiler alert. A few episodes later, Daniel asks her why Emily was standing by him during the trial. He asks because he is thinking Emily is in love with Jack and cannot understand what this charade with him was about. But the viewers could ask the same question. The only purpose Daniel fulfilled was to get closer to the Graysons so Emily could destroy them from the inside. And what better way was there to destroy Victoria than to take her son away? That would have weakened the family and even Grayson Global, because they wanted to make Daniel CEO. Or did Emily fear that she lost access to the Graysons when Daniel was in prison? She could still play his girlfriend even easier now that he cannot move freely. Emily could pretend still standing on his side and helping the Graysons to get him out of jail while investigating on her own about the David Clarke trial. She could even try to get closer to Conrad and suggested she could help him. Emily must have some kind of profession and knowledge she could use up front. She was volunteering Tom Kingsley's campaign and surely had multiple cover-ups to gather information about her targets, so she could tell Conrad that she would be an asset as long as her fiancé was in prison. Conrad was already fond of her, she was almost part of the family, and he trusted her, so he would be easily persuaded. And in this early stage, Victoria would not be mistrustful why Emily would not move on. After all, she already assumes Emily is a grifter like she was when she landed Conrad. And she said it herself, why should Emily let all the hard work of the last months go to waste? So if Emily would be careful and made no mistake, she could have gathered all the information she needed during Daniel's stay in prison. About Daniel's defense. As I said before, I love how they get all actors get in the mix and they merge all strings together. The third person could be anyone, as we saw Fauxmanda and Jack on the beach with Tyler. So spoiler alert, Takeda did a very good job in pointing the blame on all people Emily cares about. He is not a good person because he only tries to isolate her and break her, so she goes back to being his puppet. In this season it is not as clear as in season 2, so I liked it more. In season 2 they made it too obvious for me, and Takeda was not that smart and manipulative like before. But about that when we get to season 2. About Victoria and Amanda, more obvious is again how much Victoria hates Amanda Clarke. Again she follows her dark instincts and tries to put the blame on that girl she does not even know that well. Though Victoria cannot know that Amanda was on the beach or in any way involved in this, she shouts her name. I know in a way she is right because Amanda Clarke is the nemesis of the Graysons and sits right next to her. But she is the one who set her sights on that little girl first. And spoiler alert, though it was Takeda, another victim of Flight 197, there are many more people the Graysons hurt besides the David Clarke scandal. A thing I think the writers and even more the viewers tend to forget, that the Graysons, or at least Conrad, are responsible for the deaths of many people, even before the show had just begun. About Emily and Victoria, I just loved their kind of Western-style duel in this scene and the later one with the engagement present. It almost seems as if Victoria hates Emily even more than Amanda Clarke. 'Cause Emily was the one who dared to fight back. I just adore how Victoria can hurt and insult Emily not only with a straight face but also with a compliment. This kind of thinking seems to be trained for a long time. However, it also shows what kind of danger she sees in Emily, even though Victoria does not know the truth. She sees in Emily always a competition for the love and attention of her son, and a threat for her family. About Jack hunting after Fauxmanda. It is good but boring that Emily and Nolan try to get both out of the way so that the Graysons cannot frame either of them. I think the writers choose the easy way out because there was already so much in motion after what happened on the beach. Jack and Fauxmanda would only be a distraction, so that brought him only back when Daniel was out of the woods. And it prevented them surely of being killed off like it happened in Season 2. About Charlotte, Victoria and David. As I said in the previous episode, one cannot understand why they dropped this so fast. Charlotte must have had a million questions and Victoria could have told her the truth. At least some parts of it, like how David actually was, that she never expected him to do such things as financing terrorism. It would not hurt their story about him if Victoria just answered some of her daughter's questions. I guess there must have been much shame involved, but it could have helped her daughter, who is really struggling with herself right now. Again, Victoria proves that her son Daniel is her first priority and more important than her daughter. About the flashback, I am still trying to figure out what was first. Did Conrad already knew about the affair and maybe even planned to use David as a scapegoat when something goes wrong in the first place? Or did Victoria came up with the idea and confessed her sins to her husband, who did not know anything yet? Spoiler alert. In Season 4, Victoria admits that she was the one who came up with the idea of framing David because she was afraid. But it could also be true that Conrad had that plan in mind and just wanted her to think it was her idea. So his self-loathing and desperation in the first flashback was only well played. Anyway, it seems as Victoria was truly in love with David and had to decide if she wants to leave Conrad and walk away with David and their children. So she could have used the information Conrad gave her to finally get rid of him and build a new life with David. She could have asked him about his first wife instead of choosing to be afraid of her new future and staying with Conrad. Victoria had everything she needed to start a new life. The only thing missing was her courage and commitment to see it through. David seems to me like a naive man, but not dumb. He could have get a new job fast and offered her not the same amount of wealth as Conrad, but surely enough to live a good and carefree life. And since we saw him in the flashbacks with Amanda, David would have been a far better father and role model for Daniel and Charlotte than Conrad. That was maybe the biggest failure in her life, that Victoria did not took that chance. About Nolan and Takeda working together. This was something I did not like as a viewer, cause Nolan broke Emily's fresh invested trust in him. But story-wise this stunt was very good because it shows that Takeda planned all this with the same precision he taught Emily. And it is far better solution than having Daniel or Fauxmanda kill someone. I know she did it once for Emily. But in Daniel's case it would have been worse because we have not seen his anger issues yet. About Ashley's role in Daniel's trial. Her trying to capitalize out of this scandal was fitting for Ashley's character. But I must admit I was happy when she did not succeed. In true life she surely would have landed on her feet and got the dream job, which would have been an elegant way to get rid of her. But I must admit in season 2 I was almost glad she stayed. Her storyline with Conrad was not that much annoying than her dating Daniel. And when she helped Jack at the end of season 2 I almost forgot how much I dislike her character. Her outfits in season 2 improved very much. I loved her more elegant looks. Like Olivia Pope in Scandal, another ABC show I adore, she always looked fabulous. About Charlotte and Emily. With this scene I am really torn. I enjoyed them sitting on the swing and talking about their father. It is the only calm scene in which Emily at least tries to behave like her older sister towards Charlotte. But why does she not try to help her when she is that obviously on the brink of a breakdown? And what she tells Charlotte about their father could not only be an attempt to calm her and get close to her but to drive her to ask more questions, so that she can high-pressure her mother Victoria about this cause. Emily cannot do this without arousing suspicion. And again I must admit that Emily should have tried harder to help Charlotte instead of letting her down. At this early stage she could have made a real impact without any damaging consequences. About the Porter boys. This one will always be my favorite storyline with Jack and Declan. For the first time Declan does something that has nothing to do with Charlotte. I like that the two brothers stick together and that Declan does not think or asks for a second if Jack did kill Tyler. He just knows that it is not true and wants to protect his brother even if it means protecting him from himself. That was a strong move in pure Porter fashion. About Conrad and Victoria. I like this little scene because it reminds us that Victoria chose this marriage and was not always trapped in it. She must have felt something for Conrad, otherwise she surely could have found another customer of the gallery who was not married and was easier accessible. And for a time before David Clarke and the Flight of 197 they must have been happy together like they are in this little scene. After all, the two really fit together because they are both ruthless and ambitious. About Daniel going to prison. It is only natural that he gets no bail because of the resources of the Graysons. They surely would have tried all tricks to keep him out of jail. I was happy that they took full advantage of the character they build. Daniel really feels like a lamb that is going to slaughter like David Clarke was. And I love that they show Emily's reaction to this. She is far away from the cool manipulative bitch she was in the first episodes. The impact of Daniel's change in the later episodes is even greater when we see how fond Emily already grew of him. She really loves him and feels that loss and betrayal when he turns to his father's side. One last thought. I like that they stick to the original scheme by showing us the solution at the end of the episode. After all, it is Takeda's takedown of Tyler, and if his plan succeeded, of Daniel or Jack, because these were the boys that stand in the way of Emily's mission. It seems as if Takeda was monitoring Emily and was not pleased by what he saw. He thinks Emily's emotions for either of the three, Daniel, Jack and Fauxmanda, just stand in the way of her revenge agenda. So he wants to eliminate those distractions. I like that she has to stand up against Takeda in the next couple of episodes. Would have been better if they had her actually fight against him again in season 2 instead of Aiden.